Welcome back for the first session of the conference. The first session is titled Migration Management in Turkey. As the chair, I invite Professor Saime Özçürümez from Başkent University and the esteemed panelists, Professor Murat Erdoğan from Hacettepe University, Professor İbrahim Kaya from Istanbul University, and Dr. Hülya Kaya from Birmingham Newman University.
Good morning, everyone. After this really inspiring talk by Professor Hathaway, we're moving into a very wonderful panel with brilliant panelists who have diverse backgrounds in terms of their work on migration governance. And I think this is going to be a very rigorous examination of one of the most legally consequential issues in international affairs. And we're going to listen to different talks from different panelists here. But I think Professor Hathaway also underlined a very important theme that's going to be underlying for this whole conference, which is brilliantly organized. I would like to thank my friend and colleague, Professor Gülüm Özçelik, for this brilliant organization as well. We're not going to just talk about a humanitarian emergency. We're going to talk about actually legal aspects of these emergencies that are around the world. And we're going to also discuss legal and political responses and what happened during those responses, and whether we do have an opportunity to have a framework with binding obligations, with enforceable rights, and actually accountability that can be backed by different actors around the world. We were going to be starting with Professor Dr. Murat Erdoğan. I thought he needs no introduction, but I'll still say a few words about his CV. He's a political scientist and a migration researcher. He's a member of the UNESCO Turkey Communication Committee, member of Metropolis International Advisory Board, and the president of Asylum and Migration Association Center, IGAM Academy. And since July 2025, he's the director of Turkish Diaspora Studies Center of Migration Research Foundation. His academic research interests include voluntary and forced migration, refugees, people of Turkey origins living abroad, EU politics, political cartoons, political behavior, Islamophobia, and he is the famous author, also, architect of the Syrians Barometer, which is, to my knowledge, the most influential longitudinal study on social cohesion in Turkey. So, please, the floor is yours. You'll have 15 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Gülüm Hocam çok teşekkür ediyorum. Dicle Hocam çok teşekkür ediyorum. Thank you. I have some problem with my English. My foreign language is German. It will be not enough good, but understandable, I hope. And then after Professor Hathaway, it is, of course, very difficult, but I'm very happy because of the very, very similar ideas and criticism we have also this topic. I would like to give you an overview about the migration issue in Turkey, what we have, and then what is the experience in Turkey. We have very different type of migration in our country, actually. We have the beginning of the Republic, we have population exchange with Greece and the other countries. It was a nation-building process. And then in this sense, migration was a very important tool for the new republic. And then secondly, we have very intensive domestic migration. As you know, we have 85 million population in Turkey. Each year, more than 3 million Turks, they move from a city another city. It's a very important dynamic, and then it changes, and then it dominates also political and then social life. And then third one is Turks in European countries. We talk about the diasporas, etc., but it is also another dynamic, and then we can also understand what does it mean integration, what does it mean social cohesion, and then integration processes. And then lastly, refugees and irregular migrants in Turkey. We have this experience, dominantly after 2011 from Syria. What happened, and then why we get the Syrian refugees? Because of the demonstration in Syria, and then Assad regime's behaviors, etc., as you know. And then secondly, it is also very important, we cannot ignore that ISIS and the other terror organizations in this region, and then it affects also very dominantly escape from Syria and then come to Turkey, not only Turkey, but Lebanon, Jordan, and the other neighboring countries. And then it is the root of the whole issue. What was the beginning of the process? We tried to make an emergency policies through the AFAD. It's an also institution for the responsible for the emergency policies, and some other institutions. At that time, in 2011, we had no institution for migration management. Our migration management institution, PMM or DGMM, was previously established first in 2014. At that time, we had in Turkey over 2 million refugees. This figure is for me very important. What was in 2011 in Turkey? We had only 58,000 refugees, 58,000. And then other foreigners in Turkey with resident permit, etc., altogether 300,000 foreigners in Turkey. But then suddenly, Turkey was the most refugee hosting country, and then we had this title around 10 years between 2014 2023. Of course, it was not easy to manage, and then Professor Hathaway also mentioned that. Very important issue I will also include in my speech, a part of the whole problem or whole process. EU plays very important role, and then Turkish-EU relations, and then EU's policies, etc. We discuss also even today. We know the typical reaction of the societies. I am working on mostly social cohesion, and then for the migration, I have always this concern or concept. Migration is not a temporary issue. If millions of refugees or migrants go to any country and then establish their life, then it's very difficult to go back. And then now we are discussing also the return, voluntary return, etc. But I have even today this concept. The Turkish society's patient was very important till 2017-18, because the Turkish society think that the Syrian will go back and soon. And then it gave also courage, and then they showed their solidarity with the Syrian refugees, etc. It was really very interesting. And then I make also my survey, Syrian Barometer survey, and then we say that always social acceptance level of the Turkish society is relatively good. But then it changed everything because of this concept. Syrian will stay forever in Turkey, and then it will be a problem for the criminality, for the economy, for identity, etc., etc. Then come another reactions. As I said that we have for the migration management process some governmental institution as AFAD, Interior Ministry, of course, and then PMM, Presidency of Migration Management. But then Education Ministry, Health Ministry, Family Ministry, and Social Services Ministry, Labor Ministry, and Defense Ministry, they were also together. But one very important tool also, other international and national institutions. UN institutions was very, very active in Turkey. Okay, we criticized a lot to the UN institution. Okay, that is also a part of the whole story, but they were also very active. And then it was also not easy for them to manage all the system. For example, in 2011, the member of the employee in IOM was around 50. Then suddenly over 2,000. It was not easy. It was also very similar for UNHCR. And then EU, as I said, that it was a very important tool. And then local and INGOs in Turkey, they were also very active. And international and then national institutions as GIZ and then Foreign Community and Development Office of British Embassy or World Bank, etc. Because of that, it is very important, very difficult to say how can we manage all the system. It's very difficult to read it. I try to understand the change of the Turkish society's mind and then change of the government policies. Here you can see a little bit better. Between 2011 and 2013, it was open door policy, very actively. and it was an emergency management, emergency policies, and everything based on the temporaries. And between 2014-16, it was a time the Syrians decided to go to another countries because they see the reality. Syria was not enough good, and then they saw also no future for Syria, and then they tried to establish a new life in European countries. But at that time, it was very dominant factor, not Assad, but I mean the Syrian regime, but the ISIS, Daesh, whatever. Their influence was very important, and because of that, they escaped from more from Syria, the other countries. And 2016, EU remembered suddenly one more time the Turkey, because around 1 million Syrian and then the other refugees, they escaped from Turkey through Greece, and then they reached the European countries. Then Turkey, EU should make an agreement. And then now we are discussing also a model, etc. I will also mention that. It was a very interesting agreement with Turkey and then EU. It was one part was instrumentalization, the other part was externalization, and then now the concept of new pact on migration and asylum is also a part of that. And then Turkey established since 2016 safe zone. It was also very important. And then at the same time, in 2016 is very important because EU gave also some money for the Turkey for the integration policies, and Turkey began to make the integration policies. Once, education right in Turkish public school for the Syrian children. Second, labor possibility, I mean the work permit. Third one, exceptional citizenship, they began also. And then it was also very important time to make integration policies. And then 2020-21, Greek border, we had a problem, and as you know, the Turkey, or the previous or former interior minister had an idea to make more pressure to the European countries, and then they tried to open the door. It was a huge discussion, but it was because of the pandemic. It was very short term, but it destroyed Turkish-EU relationship a lot. And then processes very polarized and then politicized. And then after 2020-24, the government decided to push more the Syrians to go back to their country, and they stopped also citizenship policies. The political pressure was very important. And then lastly, after 8th of December, we have another Syria, and then Metin Hocam told already, after that, around 600,000 Syrian went Syria. It means 18% of Syrian, if you think about this 8th of December in Turkey. As a migration researcher, I am saying always, the main route or main option will be always stability and then stay in Turkey. But of course, some of them, they will go back, and then it's also another right for them. And then if they need or if they want to make it, of course, they can go. But important is, I think the main group will stay in Turkey. In 2025 was a voluntary return year. But in 2016, this year and then next year, if it depends on the Turkish government's policies. If the Turkish government policies would be more harder and the more they establish more pressure to the Syrians, then they will go, so-called voluntary. We say that sometimes self-deportation. But if not, they prefer to stay in Turkey. We are now already in southeast Turkey, and then we are doing also another survey. And then till now, I didn't find any person from Syria to say that I will go back. They complain about a lot Turkey, their conditions, etc. They have a lot of difficulties, but they prefer to stay in Turkey. We have 4 categories foreigners in Turkey: resident permit holders around 1 million, and then international protection holders or applicants around 150,000. Syrians, and now the last number is 2.3 million. And then irregular migrants, nobody knows the numbers. I guess around 2 million. But it is not easy to understand. It is the Syrians in Turkey and then their numbers. And then now a summary of the Syrians, for example, around 800,000 Syrian children between 5 to 17, they are school-age children, and then around 75% they are in school, at least registered. Nobody knows exactly how active is that. And then around 240,000 citizenship get the Syrians. We have active worker Syrians between 600,000 to 1 million, and then over 50,000 university students. Now, I would like to also talk about a little bit Turkish-EU relation in this framework. Turkish-EU relations not began with refugee crisis. It is very important to say that. And then for the EU, it was a migration agreement. For us, it was an agreement for Turkey and then to close to European Union. Of course, it was a time, you know, most of them, you know him, Jeff Krebs, he sent this tweet in 2017. Of course, it was a huge challenge for the European countries, and then we could understand how difficult was this managed whole system, and then because of that, we made an agreement. But don't forget, Turkish-EU relations, ECC, etc., it began 1959, and then we had an agreement in 1961. We have Customs Union 1995, and then 2005, Turkey began to make negotiation for the membership. And then without this story, we could not also make this kind of agreement. It was very important. It was also an instrument for the Turkish government to use the refugees to make agreement with EU and then close the EU. And then for the EU, it was, of course, an externalization policy. Without Turkey, they could not make it. And then we made an agreement. It was very, very funny agreement without signature. No formal agreement, no institutions owner, no approval from European Parliament, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, functional. How functional is that? It was 9 points for this agreement. Only 2 as functional. 1, EU sent money. 2, Turkey keep the refugees in Turkey. Okay? And then it means agreement between externalization and instrumentalization is very clear. For the Turkey, it was the other points was much important than money. EU membership, Turkey, visa freedom, etc., etc. But unfortunately, not only because of the EU, I have to say that, because of the political condition in Turkey, it was not easy time for Turkey. But end of the day, we have only 2 points, and then now Turkey, EU see this agreement as a model. It is really very interesting, but Mr. Haneway said that also. Now the responsibility sharing is a fantasy, unfortunately. Unresponsibility, organized unresponsibility, it is a word of Professor Ludger Priest from Germany. It is, unfortunately, it is very important. What was the Turkey's expectation? It was clear. I don't want to repeat all of them, but result financial support without political expectation. What was the for EU side? Main expectation was stopping the passage of the refugees and irregular migrants into Europe, and end of the day, okay, we have that. And then plus, they give money to Turkey, thanks to EU. We had in Turkey no money from other countries. I mean, from US, around 100 million euro per year. No money from China, no money from Russia, no money from Arabic countries, etc. Because of that, I am thankful to EU. But we know also very well why EU give this money to Turkey for the integration policies, because for the EU, the best Syrian was happy Syrians in Turkey. And then I can understand, I have also respect. Each country can protect themselves. I have no idea. But too much externalization has also a limit. And then now we are talking about also third safe country concept. It is really horrible. And then we will be suddenly see some refugees from Turkey in Uganda or another countries, and then Europeans say that, yeah, okay, but we have an agreement. I mean, it was not only readmission agreement, now we have another concept, and then I have very huge problem for that. EU makes some, how much cost the refugees? Refugee issue is very costly. And then Professor said that also. Responsibility sharing means not money sending. Responsibility sharing means to take some people. And then they said that no, we don't want to have people. Why? Because their democracy is under the threat. Okay, good. But what about our democracy? And then we are witnesses all the process, how difficult is now in Turkey the democracy, human rights, because of the refugees, because of the relations with Western countries. We cannot ignore that. It is very important. And then for the cost, small point. From now, I think they know much better than me, around 12 billion euro sent the EU to Turkey. Very important money. But refugee cost is not only money, but also security issue, political issue, social issue, etc. Unfortunately, Turkish society, they lost their wellnesses. And then it's also very huge problem for next future. Racism, hate speech, it's a very ordinary issue. And then it is also all because of the refugees, I mean, the last 15 years. And then everybody say that they send money and then they keep their countries. Why should we take them our country? That's also another argumentation. I made a very simple calculation, and then my dear moderator, she showed me the 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. Maybe it will be 2 minutes, but no more. I made a calculation. A refugee costs around 15 to 25,000 euro per year for the European countries. Okay? I made an imagination, and then sent all in my mind, of course, all the Syrians to European countries, and then I make a calculation, simple calculation. Refugee, multiple, and then the 15,000 euro, not 25. If the Syrians were not in Turkey but in European countries, it will cost for the EU over 550 billion euro. Okay, it's a fantasy, and then it is, but only to understand how much important is this agreement. And then suddenly we had a new model with European countries. It was an Erdogan-Merkel model. Now we have von Leyen and an Erdogan model. After Assad, Leyen was immediately in Turkey, and then she said that we give 1 billion euro more. And then now, 3 days ago, because of the Iran, yeah, okay, I understand very well. Because of Iran, she was one more time with Erdogan, and then she said that, okay, we will ready to make cooperation with Turkey, exactly with Iran. I would like to explain a little bit also about the social cohesion situation in Turkey. Gülüm Hocam said that, and then my dear Hocam, and then the most important migration expert, I can say really for Saime Hoca, I am doing so-called Syrian Barometer Survey since 2017, each year with UNHCR support. What is my aim? I try to understand the feeling of the Turkish society, concerns of the Turkish society, and then, of course, what's the situation, Syrians, what is their future plan, what is their work permit issue or conditions, etc. Already we are doing new one. We have some results, etc. I cannot explain, of course, I have no time more, but if you want, I can also send this presentation to you. But end of the day, now we have in Turkey very interesting clima. The Turkish society is very silent. Nobody criticized. And then in social media, we have also not too much criticism. Because the Turkish society, one more time, think about that, the Syrian will go back. If not, then we will see maybe more challenges. And then, for example, the citizenship policy, if we make a survey with Syrians, with the Turkish society, over 90% they say no. But if we ask the Syrians, they say exactly another answer, and then they waiting for the citizenship policy. Last slide, promise. As I said that, Syrians in Turkey, I don't want to talk about the Iran case and then the new potential, okay, only for the Syrians. Now, what could be new scenarios? It depends on the Turkish government decision. Okay, the political environment is a little bit silent, but it can be each time a new provocation. They can support the voluntary return, but not push, voluntary, really. Or secondly, continued temporary protection for the Syrians, but it is not easy, and it brings also not full protection. Or they can give the Syrians resident permits, but we have one more time for the protections issue is not easy. Third one, for international protection for Syrians, it's also very limited. It will be maybe 50,000 can reach this kind of protection. Or one more time provocation, but it is very limited option. Relaxing western borders one more time, allowing refugees to pass into Europe. It is, as I said, that only a small option, but I would like to give here. Or the Turkish government decided that, okay, they will stay forever in Turkey. Then we gave, okay, instead of the reaction of the Turkish society, citizenship. Nobody knows what's coming on. I'm sorry, it was too long. Sorry, my dear Hocam. Thank you for your patience and especially for my English. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Murat Hocam. When he's always the first speaker, I worry, but the presentation is so rich, I think we can be accommodated for that. Next, we have Professor Dr. Ibrahim Kaya from Istanbul University, Faculty of Law. He graduated from Ankara University, and then he obtained his LLM from Nottingham, and then earned his PhD in Keele. He has participated in numerous national and international research projects focusing on international migration. His co-authored book with E. Eren, titled Legal Status of Syrians in Turkey from 2015, is recognized as one of the most frequently cited academic works on this topic. We expect him on the floor now on the topic of paradigmatic shift in Turkey's migration management policy and law.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to extend my special thanks to the organizers of this wonderful international conference, and also to Murat Hoca, who saves me a lot from explaining the basic structure and figures. My title is Paradigmatic Shift in Turkey's Migration Management Policy and Law. Here we have our research question. What are the fundamental characteristics and elements of Turkey's new migration management policy and legal framework? Or thesis statement: since the 2000s, there has been paradigmatic shift in Turkey's traditional migration management policy and legal system. We have two hypotheses. Number one is Turkey's traditional migration policy, dating back to the Ottoman period, consistently prioritized the admission of ethnic Turks and individuals belonging to Turkish culture in the country. And hypothesis number two, from the 2000s onward, Turkey's migration policy no longer requires migrants to be ethnically Turkish or affiliated with Turkish culture. The political and economic causes of this transformation, as well as its economic, political, and social consequences, fall outside the scope of this presentation. What is missing here is the methodology. As lawyers, we always look at the legislation and the implementation of the legislation as our methodology. Here we have outline. First, we will try to make a very brief definition of migration policy or policies. Then we will be looking at the traditional Turkish migration policy and legal framework. One from international legal perspective, population exchange or relocation treaties, and one from Turkish national perspective, the settlement laws. Then we will move on the new Turkish migration policy and legal framework in 2000s. Just to save time, I skip the details, but I'll show them in a moment. there are plenty of different definitions in the literature. I got very prominent two of them here. We may say that the migration policies are defined as the rules comprising laws, regulations, and measures that national states establish and implement with the objective of influencing the volume, origin, direction, and composition of migration flows. Through these policies, a government articulates its intentions regarding the selection, admission, settlement, and deportation of foreign nationals residing within its borders, encompassing laws, regulations, decisions, or orders. So what we have today in Turkey is a choice, a policy determined by the government as the Turkish migration policy. Let's turn to the traditional migration policy. In the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire emerged as a destination for numerous Turks and Muslims from the Balkans and Russia. Within the establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923 and its nation-building agenda, this policy was continued by welcoming migration from Turkish communities abroad. Notably, Turkey entered into various population exchange agreements with Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania, through which far more than 500,000 Turks settled in Turkey shortly after the World War I. Here is the population exchange agreement between Turkey and Greece, which is illustrative of Turkish stance on immigration policy. I'm not going to go through the article, but it requires a compulsory exchange of nationals between Turkey and Greece on the basis of religion, as part of the nation-building process identified as Turkification and Islamization of the population. The criteria for classifying a person as Turkish or Greek was exclusively religious. I mean, Muslims were classified as Turks and Christians as Greeks. As a result of the population exchange, approximately 1.2 million Orthodox Christians were compelled to migrate from Turkey to Greece, whereas around 500,000 Muslims had to migrate from Greece to Turkey. Although the Lausanne Treaty on Population Exchange is the most prominent agreement concerning this issue, it is not singular in nature. In 1925, Turkey concluded a treaty of friendship with Bulgaria that included provisions related to migration. Under this treaty, nearly 200,000 ethnic Turks migrated to Turkey prior to the World War II. Similarly, treaties with Romania and Yugoslavia produce comparable outcomes. The migration had not always been compulsory, but also voluntary. In 1968, Turkey and Bulgaria signed another treaty, very long title of treaty, and we have the article. Under the terms of this agreement, over 130,000 individuals of Turkish descent migrated to Turkey. Notably, the most significant migration wave from Bulgaria occurred in 1989, during which more than 300,000 Bulgarian nationals of Turkish origin relocated to Turkey. For the purposes of my presentation, it is essential to emphasize that all migrants involved in these movements share Turkish ancestry, which constitute the primary criterion for immigration acceptance into Turkey. When we look at the national legislation with regard to migration flows, we could see the settlement laws. to facilitate the settlement and naturalization process for these immigrants, the Turkish parliament enacted legislation governing settlement alongside favorable provisions with citizenship laws. The initial legislative framework was established in 1926, which remained effective until its replacement in 1934. The most recent settlement law was promulgated in 2006, which is still in force. According to Article 2 of the 1926 law, regulating conditions for acceptance as immigrants from abroad, those who do not belong to the Turkish culture, anarchists, spies, Roma people, and those previously expelled from the country shall not be accepted. Italics added. Similarly, Article 3 of the 1934 law states, in Turkey, individuals and tribes of Turkish descent, whether sedentary or nomadic, and those affiliated with Turkish culture who seek to settle in the country from abroad, either individually or collectively, are admitted under the directives of the Ministry of Interior. Again, Turkish descent and Turkish culture are the main criteria. The most recent legislation concerning settlement, enacted in 2006, similarly defines migrant with reference to Turkish identity. Under Article 3, migrants are persons of Turkish descent and affiliated with Turkish culture who came to Turkey alone or collectively. So when we look at even the most recent piece of legislation, we always see there is a reference to Turkish dysentery and Turkish culture. It is estimated that between 1923 and 1999, over 1.6 million individuals migrated to Turkey and subsequently acquired citizenship. According to settlement laws, only those identified as being of Turkish descent are eligible for acceptance as migrants into Turkey. Now let's turn to the new Turkish immigration policy and legal framework. Since the beginning of 2000s, it has been observed that Turkey has adopted a different approach towards migration management policy and relevant laws, which can sometimes be described as an open-door policy, the term also used by my colleague, Professor Murat Erdoğan. In 2002, a new government assumed power and initiated negotiations for EU membership. During this process, the government adopted the National Action Plan for Asylum and Migration, which aimed to fully reform immigration legislation by 2012 with the objective of gradually harmonizing Turkey's immigration framework with the EU acquis. So there is a direct link between the shift in Turkish migration policy and the EU negotiation process. In 2013, the Turkish Parliament enacted a new legislation titled the Law on Foreigners and International Protection, the current law. The law includes a definition of migration in its Article 3. Migration means regular migration whereby foreigners legally enter into, stay in, or exit from Turkey, as well as irregular migration whereby foreigners enter into, stay in, or exit from Turkey through illegal channels and work in Turkey without a permit, as well as international protection. Although this definition doesn't specifically define the term migrant, it ultimately delineates who will be admitted into country. A highly comprehensive definition has been established, as you could see, encompassing everyone from tourists visiting the country for a few days to individuals who arrive with the intention of permanent settlement and hold long-term resident permits, as well as irregular migrants. This legislation represents a significant departure from traditional policy. Although the term migration is not explicitly mentioned in the title of the law, a new institution has been established under the administration of migration, and numerous functions previously carried out by the Department of Foreigners Police affiliated with the security forces have been transferred to the newly established authority. Among the responsibilities of this directorate are activities related to migration management and also settlement. Now we have an article in the law in regards integration of migration. The translation preferred by the directorate is harmonization, which may mean also integration, or, as in the words of Murat Hoca, cohesion. The Directorate General may, to the extent that Turkey's economic and financial capacity deems possible, plan for harmonization activities. According to the legal regulation, the adaptation of Turkish society to these new migrants must be ensured. Also, we have the harmonization strategy document and national action plan, which differs from the currently effective settlement law by employing the term migrant to refer to individuals who are foreigners with legal residence rights, those who have applied for international protection or possess such status, as well as Syrians under temporary protection. Again, under this new harmonization strategy document and national action plan, strategic objective 1 is defined as managing societal perceptions regarding migration and migrants and attitudes towards foreigners in a manner that contributes to the social cohesion with the goal of strengthening societal acceptance levels toward migrants. We have different categories of the so-called migrants. As of February this year, almost 1.2 million foreigners are given residence permits, nearly tenfold increase from the beginning of the 2000s. We have the breakdown of resident permits by different categories: short-term, student, family, and others. But apart from these resident permits, we have other categories of foreigners living legally in Turkey. One of them is the people under temporary protection. Turkey has experienced two significant waves of migration in the 20th century. First, during 1979 and 1980, and second, during 1991 and 1992. In the former one, approximately 1.5 million Iranians, or maybe 2, arrived in Turkey following a regime change in Iran. Although the government didn't obstruct their entry into Turkey, these individuals were not permitted to settle in Turkey. Instead, they used Turkey as a transit country towards Western destinations. In the latter case, subsequent to the Gulf War, the Saddam regime compelled Kurds from northern Iraq to flee, resulting in around 500,000 seeking refuge in Turkey. Once again, Turkey didn't allow permanent settlement. After several months, they went back. In both instances, those who entered Turkey were neither of Turkish origin nor descent and were admitted solely on a temporary basis. Upon these experience, in 1994, Turkey adopted its first legal regulation on population movements from abroad for non-Turks, either as individuals or in groups. You could see the title of the 1994 regulation, again, very lengthy one. But what is important here is that as long as there are no political decisions to the contrary, it is essential that population movements be stopped at the border and that asylum seekers be prevented from crossing over into Turkey. This was in force when Syrians arrived Turkey due to civil war in 2011 and onwards. The government made a decision to accept them into the country, so it was the policy of the government. Safe zones were established in 2016. The 1994 regulation was replaced by the new law, which was enacted in 2012, and in 2014, temporary protection regulation granted temporary protection to the Syrians. Under the current law, we have the number of Syrians, as pointed out by my dear colleague, Professor Murat Erdoğan. You could see the number of Syrians. A decrease has been observed in the number of Syrians under the protection, which may be attributed both to return to Syria and also to naturalization as Turkish citizens. Indeed, government officials report that as of 2024, approximately 250,000 Syrians have acquired Turkish citizenship. It is estimated that these individuals obtain citizenship either through marriage or via discretionary authority granted to the president under exceptional circumstances clause in the law. Since data regarding naturalizations by year and nationality are not publicly released, detailed information and updated figures are unavailable. Also, there are around 200,000 individuals who are under international protection status due to its geographical position. As pointed out before, Turkey became party to the Geneva Convention with a geographical limitation. But in practice, conditional refugee is the term used for those who come from non-European countries. Conditional refugee is de facto refugee with limited rights. But a conditional refugee has right to remain in Turkey since West doesn't take them, and also Turkey committed
Could you wrap
itself
up, Professor
to
Thank you.
prevent irregular passages from Turkey to EU, mainly Greece. They stay in Turkey, or they stuck in Turkey, but they are in Turkey and their position is completely legal. In 2017, Turkey implemented a golden nationality scheme that granted citizenship to foreigners who purchased real estate. Initially, the required property value to obtain citizenship was set at $1 million. The threshold was reduced to 250,000 USD in 2018. As you could see here, it resulted in a significant increase in real estate sales. And in 2022, the minimum property value was raised to 400,000 US dollars. It is estimated that roughly 250,000 houses have been sold to the foreigners, with a significant proportion of these buyers and their family members acquiring Turkish nationality. The primary factor contributing to the increase in housing sales between 2018 and 2022 can be attributed to the acquisition of Turkish citizenship. It's understood that individuals purchasing property not only obtain Turkish citizenship for themselves, but also for their spouses and children. This trend is particularly evident among individuals from Middle Eastern countries with large family structures such as Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Considering this, it can be posited that the number of Turkish citizenship granted may reach into the hundreds of thousands. 1 minute? All right. Also, we need to look at the statistics with regard to migrant workers, because a valid work permit as well as work permit exemption document is considered as a resident permit, and this is not included in the directorate statistics because work permits are granted by the Ministry of Labor. According to statistics provided by the Ministry of Labor, approximately 312,000 work permits were issued in 2024. This represents a nearly 30% increase compared to the previous year and nearly a six-fold increase over the past decade. Finally, irregular migrants, I don't have time, and of course I don't have figures for irregular migrants, but many enter crossing the land border from Iran on foot, while others arrive by air from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and African countries due to visa liberalization policies. As a concluding remark, I may say that this paper has investigated whether Turkey's traditional migration management policy, historically focused on the settlement and naturalization of people of Turkish descent, has evolved in recent years to encompass other foreigners, particularly those originating from Arab countries, Africa, Iran, Afghanistan, as well as Central Asia and Russia. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but this is what it is. If we only focus on Turkish miracle with regard to Syrians, in James' words, we miss the greater picture. Apart from Syrians, we have, when we look at other migrant types or foreigner types, we could see clearly there's a paradigmatic shift in the Turkish migration policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kaya. I'll immediately turn to Dr. Hülya Kaya. She's going to present on containment by cooperation, Turkey and the EU's indirect Rwanda-style asylum model under the new Migration Asylum Pact. Dr. Kaya is a visiting lecturer of law at Birmingham Newman University, and she earned her master's degree from the University of Portsmouth, UK. And assessing its impact, and her thesis was titled "The EU-Turkey Statement on Refugees: Assessing its Impact on Fundamental Rights."
Thank you very much for the invitation to this prestigious conference. Thank you, Gülgün Hocam. And it is very honored to listen Professor James Hathaway today and his solutions about this refugee crisis, actually. Today, I would like to explore the EU's new pact on migration and asylum, and also the logic inside this pact, the Rwanda logic, what it works and how this impact on Turkey. So it is very technical issue because this issue about the safe third country concept. So it is very technical issue. If I will be very boring, please let me know, because sometimes a lawyer could be very boring at that time. So I couldn't. Yeah, okay then. Now, firstly, I would like to explain what does it mean, safe third country. Is if someone coming from any country called as safe, assumed as safe, the EU would like to send them back this safe third country. Even they have no meaningful connection, they have no previous settlement there, they would like to send them back because every country now, especially the EU, would like to transfer their responsibilities to other countries. So, because of this, they would like to change their directive, 2013 Asylum Procedures Directive, with a NIVA, EU Pact and Procedures Regulation, NIV regulation, restructure the safe third country concept, and it's also nearly 4 years later, the Parliament, European Parliament, revised the revised regulation again because EU member states think that it is not enough. There is some safeguards to send them back, these coming migrants and asylum seekers. They need extra provisions to enforce it. So they changed very recently, 10th of February, the Parliament, European Parliament approved the revision, and this revision significantly expand its operational scope, and this reform opens the way of arrangement with other countries to sending asylum seekers, these countries like offshoring processing centers coming back to say. So, as Daniel team, we are discussing same issue in this conference. He will later on explain how does it work, how is working with other countries. He says that it is a new battleground because it depends on the other third countries' admission. Because if the other third countries don't accept the arrangement, new readmission agreement, it doesn't work actually. Because due to their tension between EU member states, because they don't want to share responsibility between the EU countries, they want to shift their responsibility to other third countries. But if they don't want it, at that time there is a both legal, practical, also political challenges waiting this solution. So, what is my research question in this conference? Does the new pact reposition Turkey within an increasingly externalized asylum governance model? And the other one, my research question is, does it operationally converge with Rwanda logic? And the other, my final research question is, what are the legal and political implications for Turkey? So, to understand the revised asylum procedures regulation, it is important to see the current framework, what it says, what is given to refugees, what is the difference, why they need to revise it. Even they have a long history of safe third country concept within the directive. Why they need it? Because if we look at this structure, we see that the 2013 Asylum Procedures Directive gives some precautions against non-refoulement, because it gives a Refugee Convention standard protection in this directive. Because of this, so many countries can meet the standard of being a safe third country. Even Turkey can't be as safe within this directive, because you know Turkey has a position of limits of the geographical limitation on the implementation of the convention. Also, Turkey doesn't give a refugee status coming from outside of the European countries. Even Greece decided to regard Turkey as a safe country. Turkey said, I don't want to give waiting refugees in the Greece, and nearly 10,000 refugees are waiting in Greece. And the European Court of Justice said that you cannot say that Turkey is safe country. 10,000 asylum application can be seen inadmissible and let them wait for years. It is inhuman, and say that you cannot force the other third country to give them, to take them back. So you have to be let them accept as a normal procedure. You have to be see them as a normal procedures. So now the problem solved. They just giving normal procedures. They are taking effect. It is the problem here. So the other things, every person should be examined individually. Is the country safe or not, should be evaluated individually. The other things, there should be a meaningful connection between the person and the country. If just transit this country, it is not enough according to this directive. Also, there is a suspensive effect, automatic suspensive effect in this directive. If you send them back to another country, there should be appeal procedures. You have to wait it, because it is you know, European Convention says that it should be a effective protection, effective remedy. So there is an automatic suspension effect, should be a remedy. So this directive provides a high threshold protection, but it doesn't accepted by the European countries because they couldn't operate it easily. They couldn't send asylum seekers to other countries operationally. So because of this, they want to change it, and now they accepted a new asylum procedures regulation in 2024. It changed the saying, because they need a quick removal, quick sending them back to the person who is asking the right to asylum. It says that now you don't need to give refugee status. It is just giving effective protection. What does it mean, effective protection? Just giving food, shelter, basic health services, it is enough. So now so many countries are just giving some basic things, basic so it is, they are meeting standards. Also, you don't need to give refugee status. It is a temporary protection, or the other complementary protection is enough. Some states with geographical limitation also may be qualified safe third country, and also this regulation gives some flexibility. Maybe country is some part is safe, the other part is unsafe. Member states can say that this part of, for example, Afghanistan is safe. You can go there, stay there. It opens the way up, regard some countries, some parts as a safe. So it is overall, when we see it, it is easier to apply and less territorially ensured. But let me show the two frameworks side by side. You can see that current directive now will be effective until June 2026. The other will be effective on June. So it is, you can see the differences, because current one providing refugee convention standard, the other one is giving just effective protection. There is, in this directive, there should be mandatory connection. New regulation says, no, you don't need the connection. Current directive says strong judicial safeguards is mandatory. The other says no suspensive effect. Individualized assessment is mandatory, current directive. The other one, structural flexibility. So, but the story does not end here, because the Commission and proposed a new revision at this regulation. They said in May 2025, they proposed, European Parliament approved the Safe Third Country reform on 10th of February 2026. This revised provision will apply 12th of June this year. And what changed? The important thing here, as I mentioned before, no connection requirement, transit alone is enough, no suspensive effect, but it is important, the most important thing in this revision, they said that agreements with third countries is possible because it opens, it opens offshore processing. So this inadmissibility becomes structurally central rather than exceptional. So the revised regulation brings some this new assessment, but I would like to show just what does it mean for Turkey? What does it mean, these changes for Turkey? My central argument here is the sustainability of the pact's inadmissibility regime may structurally depend on containment partners such as Turkey. Turkey actually structurally embeds in EU migration governance, and EU-Turkey statement and normally operation since 2016, and effective protection standards narrows the normative distance between EU and Turkish asylum practice, and so Turkey become a safe third country, could be an offshoring center in the future, because it these legal amendments give a legal ground to political arrangement. So, I now turn to the final question. Could the new pact push Turkey toward a Rwanda-type externalization model? A full Rwanda-style transfer system now is unlikely because it is a political issue. Negotiation should be done between the EU and Turkey, but it calibrates inadmissibility doctrine in a ways that favor containment partners. In other words, the pact does not create a Rwanda model for Turkey, but it consolidates Turkey's structural role in Europe's externalized migration governance. So, this brings some risk. We know that as a lawyer, because there is some vulnerabilities, Article 3, Article 13, collective expulsion. So we will see so many cases bring to Strasbourg after June. I am just 1 minute. So if you look at the Luxembourg, same risk over there. So I would like to conclude. I saw in this my research 3 structural shifts. First one, from convention-based protection to functional protection. The second one, route-based responsibility to destination-based responsibility. And the final one, responsibility sharing to responsibility shifting. This raises a fundamental question here. How far can responsibility be displaced before judicial limits are reached? So the judicial authorities will decide how this pact will be implemented. And so, final reflection, the new pact does not copy the Rwanda model, but it embeds its logic within EU law. The future of EU asylum governance may depend less on legislation and more on judicial constraints. Thank you very much.